Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning into In and Out Radio Show with Barb, Robin, and Shirley. Today's guests are Jackie Robinson, Frank Sinatra, and James Stewart. Hello, my name is Shirley. I'm meeting here with Jackie Robinson. I have a few questions that we baseball fans would like to know about the legendary player. After high school, did you attend a college? And did you play any college sports at the collegiate level?
Well, after high school, I went to UCLA. While I was there, I played football, basketball, track, and also baseball. That wasn't my strongest sport.
In the year of 1945, I see that you managed to break the color barrier for baseball. What obstacles did you face with racism on the field and off?
Well, I had to sit in a meeting with the manager of the Dodgers about what I might face in the season. In this meeting, he made it very clear and direct on what was going to happen when I stepped on the field. There was one question that stood out to me. I asked myself, how would I handle this situation? With fans, players, and coaches yelling and stuff, and negative things in me. I just bottled all of the negative things and produced big numbers as far as home runs and playing good baseball on first base, second base, and wherever coach needed me to play that day.
How did you step out of the world of baseball?
Well, one day I had a meeting with the GM, and there was a situation where I was going to be traded to the New York Giants, and I didn't want to go to the New York Giants. I want to stay as a Dodger because that was the first team and my only team that I wanted to play for. My fans thought I would follow through with the deal, but I also was just a Dodger, so I quit after that.
After you quit the game of America's pastime sport, what did you do for a career?
Well, I was vice president of a restaurant chain called the Chock Full of Nuts. And I also had a column in the New York Times about racism and political views on race.
One last question that I want to ask. Did you help African Americans get into the public schools with white Americans?
Yes, I did. My column in the New York Times helped me with that. I actually helped the African Americans to be educated in the public eye and to have more rights in society.
Thanks, Jackie.
As many know, the movie From Here to Eternity, released in 1953, was a very dramatic movie. It focused on the war and the significant events leading up to the attack of Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Today we have Frank Sinatra with us, who played the prominent role of Private Angelo Maggio. Frank, we are all aware of the success of this movie, as well as many individual actors and actresses in the movie. Tell us more about this.
Well, as you mentioned, the movie was released in August of 1953. Myself, along with Burt Lancaster and Montgomery Clift, play the roles of the three soldiers stationed in Hawaii. The film focused on the events of the war and the tribulations of soldiers. In the film, the soldiers are stationed in Hawaii facing the hardships and struggles of being in the war. They face several treacherous situations and all of the events leading up to the attack on Pearl Harbor. The film itself was nominated for 13 Academy Awards, receiving 8 of the 13. I personally reviewed awards as well. I was awarded the Best Supporting Actor Academy, as well as Best Supporting Actor Golden Globe Award. The movie proved to be an instant hit with critics.
Wow, amazing. Everyone knows of the huge success you had in terms of your music career. How did you first get started with that?
Well, I dropped out of high school during 11th grade. I wanted to perform. I wanted to get myself noticed in the music industry. My mother was a huge part of the Hoboken Union Club, and she convinced a singing group called the Three Flashes to include me, and we later became the Hoboken Four.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Frank, for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Want to have Betty Grable's perfect legs, but you don't know the measurements?
We have the answers for you.
Your thighs should be 18.5 inches around, your calves should be 12 inches around, and your ankles should be 7.5 inches around.
With these measurements, your legs could be worth $1 million, too. Released on December 25th, 1946, It's a Wonderful Life is an American Christmas fantasy drama film produced and directed by Frank Capra, based on the short story The Greatest Gift, which Philip Van Doren Stern wrote in 1939 and published privately in 1945. The film is becoming a Christmas classic. We brought in the film star James Stewart, who plays George Bailey, a man who has given up his dreams in order to help others and whose imminent suicide on Christmas Eve brings about the intervention of his guardian angel, Clarence Odebody. Clarence shows George all the lives he has touched and how different life in his community of Bedford Falls would be if he had never been born. James, tell us about this film.
Well, it starts out in Bedford Falls, New York on Christmas Eve, 1945, when George Bailey is suicidal. Prayers for him reach all the way to heaven, and Clarence Odd-Bodied Angel Second Class is assigned to save George. To prepare Clarence, his superior Joseph shows flashbacks of George's life. The first flashback was George at age 12 when he saved his younger brother Harry, who fell through the ice on a pond, costing George the hearing in one ear. Later, he catches a potentially deadly mistake made by his boss. Distracted by the news of the sudden death of his son, George waits for Harry to graduate from high school and replace him at the family business, the Bailey Brothers Building and Loan. On Harry's graduation night in 1929, George discusses his dreams to build things and travel with his classmate Mary Hatch. Suddenly, George's uncle Billy informs him that his father had a stroke. Following his father's death, George postpones his plans in order to sort out the firm's affairs. He talks the board of directors into rejecting Potter's proposal to dissolve the company, but they agree only on one condition: that George can run it. He gives his college money to Harry for education. When Harry graduates, he brings home a wife, whose father has offered Harry a job. Although Harry vows to decline the offer for his brother's sake, George cannot deny him such a great opportunity and keeps running the building and loan. George married Mary on the same day as the Wall Street crash of 1929 and is forced to use the money saved for their honeymoon to weather a bank run. George starts Bailey Park, an affordable housing project. Potter, losing tenants, tries to hire him away, offering the 28-year-old a huge salary and the promise of business trips to Europe, appealing for his yearning to travel. George angrily rejects the offer. George is unable to enlist for World War II because of his bad ear. Harry, however, becomes a Navy flyer and is awarded the Medal of Honor. On Christmas Eve morning, 1945, the town prepares a hero's welcome for Harry. Uncle Billy goes to Potter's Park to deposit $8,000 for the building and loan. After bragging to Potter about Harry, Billy absent-mindedly leaves the money behind and Potter keeps it. When Uncle Billy remembers, he and George frantically search for the money. After berating his uncle for endangering the building and loan, George does go home and destroys his corner of the living room. He apologizes to his frightened wife and children, then leaves. Desperate, George appeals unsuccessfully to Potter for a loan. Potter tells him life insurance policy makes him worth more dead than alive. George gets drunk, then crashes his car into a tree. He staggers to a nearby bridge to commit suicide. George was unaware that Clarence has been watching him from the shadows the entire time. Before he can jump, Clarence jumps in the river and pretends to be drowning. George rescues him but does not believe Clarence claims to be George's guardian angel. When George wishes he had never been born, Clarence shows him what life would have been like without him. Bedford Falls is named Pottersville and is filled with cocktail bars, casinos, and gentlemen's clubs. The old druggist went to prison for manslaughter because George was not there to catch his mistake, and his father's business had failed due to Uncle Billy's incompetence. George attracts police attention and flees to his embittered mother's home, now a boarding house. She reveals that Uncle Billy was institutionalized after the stock market crash. In the cemetery where Bailey Park would have been, George discovers the grave of his brother, who drowned without intervention. Consequently, the hundreds of servicemen Harry would have saved are also dead. Mary is a timid spinster working at the library. George runs back to the bridge and begs for another chance. His prayer is unanswered and he runs home joyously, but the authorities are waiting there to arrest him. Mary and Uncle Billy rally the townspeople who donate more than enough to cover the loss. Harry toasts the richest man in town. A bell on the Christmas tree rings, and his daughter recalls the story that it means an angel has just earned its wings.
Wow, James, that sounds like a great movie. I'll have to see it very soon. Thank you for being on our show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I just recently read this book by George Orwell called 1984.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that.
It sounds really good. What's it about?
It's about Winston Smith who's in Airship One, which is previously known as England. He lives in a one-room apartment in London, and there's telescreens in every building and hidden microphones and cameras so that the thought police can identify anyone who might go against the party. And children are indoctrinated to inform on suspected thought criminals, especially their parents. Winston works at the Ministry of Truth as an editor responsible for changing historical archives. He rewrites records and alters photographs to conform to the state's ever-changing version of the truth, rendering deleted or arrested people unpersons. The original documents are incinerated in a memory hole. Winston becomes interested in the true past and tries to learn more about it. Beside his apartment's telescreen, where he believes he can't be seen, he begins writing a journal criticizing the party and its leader, Big Brother, which, if discovered by the thought police, warrants death. At the Ministry of Truth, Julia, whom Winston hates, secretly hands Winston a note confessing her love. Winston realizes she shares his hatred of the party, and Winston and Julia begin a love affair. Winston approaches inter-party member O'Brien, whom Winston believes is an agent of the Brotherhood, a secret organization that intends to destroy the party. After discussion, O'Brien gives Winston the book, The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism by Emmanuel Goldstein, the publicly reviled leader of the Brotherhood. The thought police capture Winston and Julia in their bedroom and deliver them to the Ministry of Love for interrogation. O'Brien is a thought police agent, part of a sting operation used by the thought police to root out suspected thought criminals. O'Brien tortures Winston by shocking him, showing him how, through controlled manipulation of perception, Winston can cure himself of his quote-unquote insanity, his hatred for the party. O'Brien explains the inter-party's motivation, complete and absolute power, mocking Winston's assumption that it was somehow altruistic and for the greater good. Winston confesses to crimes he did and did not commit, implicating anyone and everyone, including Julia, but O'Brien understands that Winston has not betrayed Julia, as he has not stopped loving her. O'Brien sends him to room 101 for the final stage of re-education, the most feared room in the Ministry of Love, which contains each prisoner's worst fear. As a wire cage holding hungry rats is fitted onto his face, Winston shouts, "Do it to Julia," thus betraying her. After being reintegrated into Oceania society, Winston sees Julia in a park. She reveals that she was also tortured, and each admits betraying the other. Later, Winston, who is now an alcoholic, sits by himself in the Chestnut Tree Cafe, troubled by memories which he is convinced are false. A news bulletin announces Oceania's decisive victory over Eurasian armies in Africa. A celebration begins outside, and Winston imagines himself as part of it. As he looks up in admiration at a portrait of Big Brother, Winston feels he has at least ended his stubborn, self-willed exile from the love of Big Brother, a love Winston happily returns.